Yeah, there is something I want to leave on my phone, but I know exactly where it is. It's still sitting in the coffee
At least you know where it is. Most people don't know where they left it.
table.
Yeah, that's why I would use.
If something happens to me from here on, we got a long walk.
And no one sitting in my car, and I found it the next day.
You did you?
I had it sitting back there.
Yeah. So now you have 2 phones?
Same number.
Well, that's handy. You keep one in 2 different rooms.
Stereo.
Rings all over.
One in 2 different pockets.
Okay, and that is, it's on, but I think we can kind of do it whenever.
Yeah, I'm just waiting. I'm gonna tap it, and it's a workshop, not a,
So it's 6 o'clock.
oh, we're not, are we on? Oh, that's fancy. Okay, this is our workshop. It's, was called for the board to discuss the common property tax assessment in the declaration of protective restrictions. We had a partial discussion at the last board meeting in November, and we decided to continue the discussion today. Part of the question being is that according to Texas 209, assessments are, must be described in our governing documents, and it is, and we have a common property assessment that's on page 6 of 16 of the declaration, titled Common Property Assessment. However, it was determined when the common property taxes were received from Kinney County that it was confusing in the way that it was written. The board then decided that we would take another look at it to see what changes, if any, we should make to clarify it. And then any changes in the declaration must be approved by a vote of membership, and any changes would be put on the ballot for the 2021 directors election. So this is a workshop. We're just going to keep it informal, and we're going to discuss it, and then once we've been doing some discussing, we'll take questions from our two members who are interested enough to show up. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we try to keep everything open and obvious. Okay, as it reads right now, common property assessment. The board may levy assessments for the purpose of timely paying taxes, rates, and expenses on the common property to Fort Clark Municipal Utility District of Kinney County, Texas, for which payment the members and association are liable. If such taxes are levied by said district to pay the principal of and interest on any bonds, notes, and or other obligations of said district issued for the purpose of providing water and sewer facilities to serve the association. Section I, assessments shall be made under this subsection only in the event the restricted fund does not contain adequate funds to timely pay said taxes, and there are no other funds available to the board for such purpose. Any assessments are II paragraph. Any assessments levied by the board shall be determined by the board and apply to members, family recreation members, and charter members. This assessment shall be in addition to any other assessments levied by the board under this declaration, notwithstanding any other provisions of this declaration. Those are the sections that we're concerned about. Section 3 is that just states that each member shall be personally liable for the assessments on his or her membership. And 4, for family recreation members and charters, assessments not paid within 30 days after the due date will be deemed in default and bear interest. So the sections that we're concerned about today are the common property assessment. And because of the confusion in the language, we elected this year to cover the common property taxes under Section C, special assessments, which we can call once per year for specific needs. Okay. At the last board meeting, I made some just simply suggestions that we discussed. I did it to at least start the conversation. Everybody has a copy of that. And I guess because this is a workshop, I'll just get everybody's, where do we go from here? Dustin?
Yeah, so One, there was a suggested amendment to one assessment that you did not mention, and that is the restricted fund. In the declarations, the restricted fund is an assessment. It has come to be used just as a fund where we impound money that can't be touched except for very certain specific things that can't be used for the general operations of the fort. But it is, in the declarations, its own assessment. So I will read to you what it says. The board may levy assessments for the purpose of establishing a restricted fund to defray costs of creating subdivisions, provisions for off-site improvements, capital improvements, reserves for replacement and maintenance, historic preservation, and the maintenance of any debt service, public or private. There was a suggested addition to change it to maintenance of any debt service, comma, including taxes, comma, public or private. Firstly, I don't think that's necessary because a public debt service is taxed. That's what public debt service is. So we don't need that in there. My main point in reading this is the restricted fund exists to pay debts for the fort. All of them. Taxes, all debt service. That's what this fund is for. It's not just for preservation and maintenance, capital improvements and things like that. It's to pay debt service. The common property assessment came into being much, much later in the fort's history. After the mud was separated from the fort and they started issuing bonds to create and maintain their infrastructure. So that created a problem for the fort because assessments that was going, for some reason, the fort does not assess a restricted fund assessment. We've decided to take a couple bucks out of everybody's regular assessments and stick it in the restricted fund. So that money wasn't covering the service on the bonds that the mud was selling. So they created a common property assessment. Okay? Then the common property assessment got to be utilized for paying the common property tax from the county appraisal district. Which I have no problem with, so long as, well, I do kind of have a problem with it because the declarations say that's what the restricted fund is for, not the common property assessment. But since that's the way we've decided that we're going to use it, we do need to amend the language in it. The suggested changes were the board may levy this is for common property assessments. The board may levy assessments for the purpose of timely, and now I'll start the proposed amendments. Payment of common property taxes, rates, and expenses, including to or for Fort Clark Municipal Utility District of Kinney County, Texas, period. The Fort Clark Springs Association and its members are liable to the Fort Clark Municipal Utility District if such taxes are levied by said district to pay the principal of and interest on any bonds, notes, and or other obligations of said district issued for the purpose of providing water and sewer facilities to serve the association. The amendment is assessments levied to pay said district taxes into the amendment shall be made under this subsection only in the event the restricted fund does not contain adequate funds to timely pay said taxes and there are no other funds available to the board for such purpose. So again, in the common property assessment, we have stated once again that that is the purpose of the restricted fund. But should it not contain enough money, we're going to issue this. The next amendment is II. Assessments levied to pay association common property taxes billed by the Kinney County Appraisal District shall be paid by the association and its members, period. Members for the purpose of a common property assessment are lot owners, charters, and family recreation pass holders. I think this one is going to be an issue. Because up here in the the main paragraph of the common property assessment, while we made amendments to it, the entire thing is for paying the MUD's bonds. Even the part that's not amended, like, that's the purpose of it. So if we are gonna amend it to make it service debt from the Kinney County Appraisal District, we're gonna have to change that main paragraph.
Agreed. Agreed.
But you just keep saying MUD's bond.
It's
Yeah.
not,
Well, it's just,
It's not MUD's bonds that I'm.
So when you get your,
When we get our water bill, there is
What
a,
if-
there's an amount of
what
money
if-
in
what
there
if
we're
time-
paying to pay the bond off.
when you're
Right.
getting your taxes, there's a MUD portion, you have your Kinney County.
Right,
Okay, so what the restricted fund has, what I like to do is work backwards and work our way back, kind of going back to the front. So how we've done this, we have the restricted fund, but the way that it is stated right here is that we're supposed to take all the money from the restricted fund, and if there isn't the money in the restricted fund, then we get to impose this assessment, which is not accurate. The restricted fund, we do get the $4. And how we used to, or how we still have done it, or whatever, the MUD portion of your taxes. So out of every single 3,000 tax bill, that, the appraisal district breaks it down for us. That money will come out, it's just the MUD portion, will come out of the restricted fund. That is why the restricted fund says included taxes, it's just the MUD tax. Then, when it comes to the common property somehow has to it's an assessment that is supposed to be part of our common property. We have 2,700 acres of the fort. 1,600 acres is supposed to be designated for common property. If you take 1,600 into 2,700 acres, that's 60%. So MUD should come out of the restricted fund, or this is what has been done in prior. The MUD portion came out of the restricted fund. The 60%, the remaining balance of the taxes that we put into an assessment, was then distributed amongst the active membership. We want it to be active because we're not going to send it to accounts that you know for sure that aren't going to be paying. And that's a whole other
that's,
topic. But that's why we still kind of want to have that one. The way that we did this and we were able to do it correctly is the special assessment is for any kind of deficit, for any fiscal year or anything like that. So we protected our membership because this is not articulated correctly. The way that Dustin kind of wants to do it, I see what he's saying on the restricted fund. However, that's going to be major construction because that's going to be a $4 off the bat increase to our FRMs, which is not necessarily, I'm not saying that's not a bad idea, but in the time where we have nothing to offer, FRMs are 150 or however many FRMs we have, a $4 increase a month we would lose all that monthly. Like I said, the way that we used to do the assessment was the MUD portion came out of impound, which is kind of addressed, but then I think there needs to be another section describing that 60%. And it's not about where we need to be specific. It's not just about raw land, no buildings or anything like that, because members can come to the member service room. It's whatever anybody can put a lien on, like if the county can put a lien on it. So that's why instead of it being 100%, whatever the tax bill is, it's 60%. So once you take the MUD portion out, you have that, and then you take that amount and you divide it by 60. And then after that, I mean, the membership is still paying for it, but to calculate the correct assessment, it should only be shared.
in other words, we have 2,700 acres, only 1,600 of them is common property, the rest of it belongs to members.
With the exception
Or-
of your unsold lots.
Right.
Well, unsold lots is a burden on us.
Okay, let me finish.
That's
Two,
membership.
But if you can put a lien on it, right. So
Yes,
until we have
You're
it,
paying taxes on all the unsold lots.
Right.
correct.
unsold lots are not common property, okay? They're considered the
It's-
property of the association.
And that's why we have to use the fraction. Instead of like taking each bill, that's why you have to keep it generic. Because if not, then you're gonna end up having just one employee go through, and that's why you go with percentage.
And I get what you're saying, and I get your point. It makes internal housekeeping
Yes.
easier for everybody that's playing in the books.
Right.
The problem is, from A to Z, this is the the trigger in our governing documents for what we can assess and why we can do it. The restricted fund does not specify MUD or Kinney County. It says any debt service, public or private, which means taxes from anybody.
Well, we run into issues about, okay, the $4 that is taken out of every membership, $1 of that is designated to preservation. So that $3 that goes into the restricted fund is designated to, for capital improvements, that type of thing. Approximately, was it $135,000? $125,000 is about $130,000 is about average for the 60% of common property that's billed to the membership, okay? That is not included in that $4 that in 2012, I think, is when the membership voted to have that $4 assessment go into the restricted fund, okay? So every year, that right now will cover our letters of credit, it will cover, part of it is preservation, the other $3, what's left in between there is what we have to spend for capital improvements. It does not take into consideration $125,000 to $130,000 every year that we, as an association and its members, must pay to King County. We cannot raise our regular assessments because we're limited to the CPI. So the common property assessment was created to take care of this common property tax. And I think Dustin is definitely right that we need to redo that main paragraph to make sure that it relates, because I think the two paragraphs that follow need to follow back to the first paragraph, and that's where the language is insufficient.
When I'm kind of looking back at this, where you say back to the CPI, that was actually a board change, not an attorney change. The attorney, it says it could be no more than 2.5%. The board actually put in shall be tied to the CPI.
Years
They
ago.
removed that.
That was years and years and years ago.
No, that was when we just voted this. This was
No, that was that beforehand. We didn't change that part at all.
So this is from the 2017.
It was,
The green one means mandatory changes, the red one means recommended changes from the attorney, and the board change was the
Yep.
blue.
but that's not the first edition that went to the attorney. That's after we made some changes, though then it went to the
But they're
attorney's
not
office.
recommending that we go with CPI. They recommended that it's kind of to the association's ear.
It's the CPI or no more
Let
than
me
two.
get this part to you, because you can try to
2.5.
see. That way you can maybe see the common property, but that's.
At any rate, what I'm saying is that we have to kind of find some way to come up with the $135,000. And they started that tax fund, which we did roll over into the general fund, right? That 30-some thousand
We
dollars.
paid taxes, what taxes we could out of it and close that account.
Right. Anyway, but that's why it was set up. And the CPI, the relation to CPI or no, 2.5% or the CPI, which is great, whichever is greatest. Okay? If the CPI is 3.5%, then we go with that. And if otherwise, we go with, if it's 1.5 CPI, we go with 2.5 is the maximum that we can ask. That was in there, that's been in there for years and years and years. Okay, we didn't change that basic part. But what we have now is a solution to the common property assessment so that we have the money to pay the taxes that Kinney County's gonna charge us every single year on common property. And the reason that everybody is assessed the common property assessment is because everybody, charters, FRMs, and members use the common property. The pool, adult center, whatever, golf course, we even have people pay to use that. But anyway, that was the purpose of it. So I agree with Dustin that to bring that second, third paragraph in, that the first paragraph has to be referenced back to that. So
So this really doesn't change anything.
We drew it.
All that does is change from common grounds to common property.
Yes.
That's not defining the assessment, it's just saying that you will be assessed to pay taxes on, instead of club grounds, which is what it used to be called, it's now called common property.
And that change was made to be in compliance or with state law, because nowhere in state law do they refer to club grounds.
Yeah.
Anything, that's the only reason that change was made, is to bring it within the language in Texas law.
So if you have the entire declarations there, so if you go to the assessments portion, there's, I believe, 4 assessments defined.
Yes, improved residential, special assessment, restricted fund, and common property.
See, I'm kind of
So those
thinking
are
how
4
we did it this year is
different-
kind of how this was kind of laid out.
Assessments. That's right, but I think we had to skirt around and use the special assessments to levy common property tax because the way it was worded, it's worded in there to levy that specific assessment would have been improper to pay the county.
So they changed the name to special, it used to be supplementary.
Yeah.
And when you look at the supplementary under the original, they included purpose of property tax.
Right.
So
Yeah,
it
that
looks
one's
like,
just
it
a
looks like
catch-all.
we did add a new,
Right, but what I'm saying
Assessment.
is, like, we got here by crazy happenstance. We've worked really, really hard this year to try to get this ship, everybody rowing in the same direction, and this board is not gonna look like this in a few months. So our legacy should be to get this
Correct.
straightened out,
Right.
so that there's no ambiguity, so that future boards can read this and know exactly
well, not only
What
board,
is
but members.
supposed to be
because
done.
It's confusing now.
how we get our money, where the money goes, what it's used for, exactly what their assessment, each assessment they get is used to provide for them. And right now, this thing is a mess. So as long as we're making one change, we need to get it right, because we have the restricted fund that exists to pay debt service. We have a common property assessment that, as it stands right now, exists only to pay the mud bonds.
Which we could have done the 61, but that assessment should have only been
And then we
that-
have a special
that
assessment,
portion.
which can be used to capture taxes, but why should it be when we already have 2 before it to do it?
Right.
Like, we need to distill this down
Well, let
to
me,
useful.
I'm gonna interrupt just for a second. The term was changed from supplemental to special assessment because that is how it is referenced within state law.
Right.
The
But,
terms, okay, that's the only
but,
reason
yeah,
that was
that's neither
changed.
here nor there.
No, she brought it up, no, just letting you know, it wasn't a new assessment, it was simply the wording, the
No.
verbiage was changed is all.
I mean, that was a board change, but I mean, that's fine, so, I mean, special is special.
It's-
Yeah, it existed before and it exists now. It
Yeah,
just,
right.
we have too many trying to do the same thing.
Right, I think that, I don't know, I think I agree with Dustin in that if we reword the main paragraph to reference both uses of the common property assessment, that should cure the issue.
Yes. Common property assessment, in my opinion, should be for common property taxes from whatever taxing entity is legally allowed to tax the property that cannot be covered by whatever's in the restricted fund.
That's right.
So
Now,
that'll make it actually easier for the appraisal office, because
It
then they
will.
wouldn't have to break it down.
Right, but I think,
The appraisal office didn't break it down, I
No, they give you the mud
did.
amount,
No, they didn't.
like the 30,000.
They gave me the total. I had to figure out everything else.
yeah, they just tax the property and hand it to you.
The mud is a special percentage of your taxes, so it's very easy.
If you
go
look
to
at the
every
plats,
statement there is, get
right
the
behind our houses in the woods,
Yeah.
between us and Scales, there's like 6 acres that mud owns
No, I,
of woods. And they
right.
get taxed on that, and that's where your percentage is coming from. But in essence,
Every tax
all the
statement has
mud,
the exact same.
it is to pay
percentage
their
of
bonds,
mud.
because their bond repayment is a whole lot higher than
Right,
their
yes.
regular operating
Absolutely.
costs.
Well-
And how the membership of this place, sidetrack, voted for that bond to be taxed ad valorem, I will never understand. It is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen.
How many years do we have left on that bond?
I think it's 9 more years.
That-
As
Is
I
that
said,
for
these are
Still
the-
2030.
Which, who tears up the roads? The school buses and the RVs. And guess
Actually,
what?
your
They don't
statement
ever
doesn't say
pay.
anything about
They don't ever
roads.
pay that, so it
Of course
goes to the
not.
assessed value. So it's the historical and the oaks.
So anyway, but
And
that's,
you-
that's,
and
that's, a-
and where you live, down that factory side area.
but that's a bond
That's
that
what
was,
pays for the road.
that's a bond that was passed. We, all of us had absolutely nothing to do with
Yeah.
that. Well, it's
2011.
something we have
Something
to
like that.
live with, for,
It was a 20-year bond.
yeah, I thought it was
I thought
30, I thought it was 20.
But it was done in 2011.
Yeah, it's a 20-year bond, I thought it was 20. So, Dustin, if we reword that first paragraph to, so that the second and third reference back to a paragraph that makes sense, you think it'll work?
I do think it'll work, and I think if we word the main paragraph correctly, the I and the I two,
Or go away.
yeah, they don't even need to exist.
It'll just be.
Like, it should be just very simple.
Okay.
This is to pay taxes that can't be covered out of the restricted fund.
Would,
Simple as that.
would you like to rewrite that for us for the
I
board meeting?
absolutely will do that.
Is that all right with everybody?
Yeah,
Bill?
that's fine.
Alan?
Just here for the.
That would be the only, so
But you've got the keys.
that would be the only place that you're gonna make a change then, as far as the declarations, is
It's the
the
assessments.
one
This is
paragraph,
gonna be,
right?
He's gonna,
Stupid.
he's gonna try to make it into one paragraph.
It will only be the common property, yeah, and I'll just distill it down to one paragraph about assessing the paid common property tax from any taxing authority with jurisdiction that can't be covered out of
but
restricted.
we do need to be careful that it isn't, because someone's gonna come back and once we get the tax bill, if we ended up taking the whole tax bill and then assessing that, then that's where I can understand the memberships getting upset because,
Well, we'll have to leave in there who gets assessed for the common
Right.
property.
well, and it would be just really the 1,600 acres, it wouldn't be the whole 2,700 acres,
But you
correct?
you can include, actually, the common property assessment doesn't have to go into that kind of calculation detail, simply because it could change someday, and we might have 28, instead of 1,600, we have 1,800 acres.
We do actually have 1,800.
Yeah,
Right. Right.
it's a minimum of 1,600.
But it says in the assessment title that it's only for common property, so my property is not common property,
That's
so that's understood.
No, but a lot of people,
But-
and what's on there is that some people think that the structures isn't considered common property.
But it's
However,
all common property.
yes, because you can put a lien on it.
Yes, it is, and so it says in the title what is taxed. We just need to make sure that it's clear who is gonna be shouldering their share, which
Sure.
is
All
everybody that uses it.
All active members.
Yes, absolutely,
I would put active only mainly because we have the colonial lots
yeah,
that are not addressed in there.
sure.
No, well, yeah. And by the way, we'd like to unplat those someday.
Someday.
Yeah, we just need, if we could combine what's in A, or I and 2I into a main paragraph, so it's clear who the people are, because some people don't think that we bill FRMs and charters, but we do. And remember, this is something the members have to also understand.
Charters get charged
Yes, they do.
They get charged that. It's the FRMs, I guess they're now being paid $41.
Yeah, they're charged the,
But charters without deeds and charters, it would not, and non-conforming, they're getting charged $45, just
yes,
like we are.
they are.
But that's where you're thinking that, I don't know, on the restricted fund, everyone should be paying the same membership?
So ideally, the way it should work is, of course, we're limited to how far we can bump regular assessments. The way it should work is the restricted fund should be its own assessment. Some board eons ago decided that's not the way they're gonna work it. We're gonna pull out of the regular
No,
assessments.
FRMs don't fall
To put
in
in
the
there.
category of 209, so you don't have to necessarily follow CPI.
The restrictive fund is only paid by property owners.
Which,
Well,
yeah,
other-
see-
Charters without deeds have it too, because they have the
Well, that's
option to let
because
it.
it's left over,
Right,
but
and-
FRMs do not, but they do play common property.
that's silly. Everybody that uses this
Mhm.
property should pay into the restricted fund because they're using all of the stuff that that fund
Yes.
is maintaining and improving and paying taxes on.
No matter what, I mean, if we raise it, what I'm saying is with an FRM, I'm just worried that if we put that big high, the 150 or whatever we have, we're gonna leave.
Right.
But I don't think that we're under CPI when it comes to.
Well, I'm not just gonna
Because they
raise
don't get to
them
vote.
anyway.
They don't get to vote because they don't have a deed.
If we're gonna raise it, we should raise all of them, but it's incremental how far we can raise them in a year. So
We have to have-
ideally, the way it should work is the restricted fund should be an assessment of whatever every year. Then you get your regular assessments, your residential and your lot assessment. That should eliminate common property tax. In the weird event that it doesn't, you have that there to cover some small, everybody needs to pay $5.
Yeah,
And then you have,
How are you going to assess, assess the membership to cover the $125,000 a year in common property taxes?
That's what
It's
he's
in your
saying.
budget.
Well, that's what he's saying with the restricted fund. The restricted fund will then now be,
right, so
Yeah, but
ideally, the
you're gonna
way,
deplete the restricted with $125,000 or 100, whatever going to
Your
bud.
taxes are in the budget. In other
Right.
words, if the budget is balanced, then you will not have
Yes.
to do a
so
special
that's my
assessment.
point. The
But we,
restricted fund exists to pay taxes, but that's not the way we have been using it for as long as I've lived here. So, now we have a common property tax assessment to eat up the rest of it,
yes.
whatever's not budgeted.
Let me put it in if you were to come in and pay your assessment. What he's saying is, like in your O1 account,
don't,
okay,
Members
so your
don't
member-
know.
your membership.
members don't know
Okay,
what
you
that
gotta pay
means.
45 and you gotta pay your 40. Okay, so you have your 45 account, but then there's also, so it would be 40, and then say $5 would go into restricted, which now say it would be the old common property. Then you have your residential would be that. So whenever they would make a payment, you would actually be going into 3 separate accounts.
Right.
And then at the end of the year, that $5 has gone into it, and that should be enough to pay for your taxes and for future development and everything else. It's like the restricted fund has its own little budget, but everyone's paying for that.
Okay, but you're going to have, okay, we assessed $35 to each membership.
40, say 40 for the membership,
Wait, just
5 to
let,
restricted.
just let me finish, because if I lose my train of thought, I'm old, I could just lose it forever. Let me finish.
Okay,
Okay, this year was $35 per membership, FRM, charter, property owner. One time, $35 to cover our common property tax from the county. Okay, so are you saying that our rest of, other than the $4 that goes in there, $1 is not gonna cover it because you're taking it away from funds that we use for day-to-day for expenses, okay? Because if I'm just rounding up, if it's $45 and 4 of it's going into the restricted fund, $41 goes to the daily expenses, daily operations of the fort. If you take more money out of that, then you're gonna have less money available for daily operations of the fort. So that's gonna affect your budget in the long run, because you're gonna have less in the budget for daily operations. So common property assessment, one time a year, at approximately $35 per membership, covers that without depleting or taking money away from either your regular assessment or your residential assessment. That's my concern, because if we owe, what do we owe MUD this year?
23,000.
About 23,000, okay, so between the 125 and 23,000, 150, $60,000 every year would be coming out of the restricted fund that we would have to find some way to put back in there to take. So that's why I believe that the common property assessment, I don't hate to use the special assessment because sometimes emergencies arise, like when we had to do the one for the dump truck, right? We simply did not have $60-some thousand just to buy a truck. So we had the special assessment, and there was another thing that came up at the same time, and I can't remember what it is right offhand. So the special assessment is one of those guarded, protected assessments. And God forbid that we have some really terrible thing happen here, that we need to do something. That special assessment is the only way we can do that.
If I'm following the way that you're thinking, we have the restricted fund, and every membership puts into it. So let's make this really, really easy. So your membership, if you have a lot, is $40. If you have a water and sewer tap, which is called your residential, let's call that, we're paying $40. You have $5 left over. That $5 goes into the restricted fund. 5 times 12 is 60, which is $60 per account, which your membership account. So we're already almost doubling it. So the money would all go into restricted, we would have more than enough to pay your taxes, and then we still would have a restricted fund for capital improvements, is what
Right,
he's
so-
saying.
Right, and
And then we
you're
still have a
trying to
special.
make this a little more complicated than it needs to be.
Really
What-
not
The
trying to
way
make
we're
it
working right
complicated.
now is the taxes are budgeted in general operating funds.
Correct.
Correct. The restricted fund
understand that.
exists for taxes.
I understand
Because we can't just go in there and raid that kitty bank. That tax money is there at the end of the year. So it's the same if we budget for our taxes in the restricted fund
Actually-
as it is in the general fund.
Actually, the restricted fund doesn't need to be used for taxes, it can be used for taxes.
Right,
But it can, I mean, we could have written it out of the general fund. It would make no
Absolutely.
difference.
but I'm
It's
just
just
going by what the
there.
declaration
It just
says.
says that you can use it for taxes.
Right.
Not that it has, money has to be put in there for taxes.
It mostly says what you
And
can
everything
do.
that we budget basically $10,000 per month for property taxes, which comes out to $120,000. The restricted fund and your other assessment is when your budget does not make you enough money to break even, but you don't have enough money to pay
Bingo.
taxes.
So
Right.
I'm
That's
fine,
when
and
it
I'm
says-
fine with that.
That's when it says you can pay out of the restricted fund.
But I would much rather, as a dues paying property
Exactly.
owner here,
Just-
pay $3 more a month, every month, than to get another $35 bill at Christmas time.
Per
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, per lot.
And my goal is basically double your restricted fund in the next year.
Well, that's what I'm
Yeah, but where's
saying.
that money gonna come from? Well, obviously.
Each membership pays 40.
Watching your bills.
Take
Yeah.
take the
Yeah,
$5.
but none of those are guaranteed right now.
The thing
We're
is,
spending
though,
money to get that money back.
you're not going to eliminate the possibility of using or having a special assessment, an emergency assessment.
Oh, and nobody's talking about doing
No.
that.
I know, but that's what I'm saying, so that we still would have the ability to have a special whatever you want to call
The
it,
idea is
special
not-
A
assessment.
special, if there's a
Because of
deficit.
a, you know,
Right.
forest fire or
But
something.
if
The
we
idea
can
is
pull-
not to have a special assessment.
Right, and if we can
Right,
pull
right,
the
right.
taxes
And that's what-
out of regular assessments
Right.
every month,
Yes, like $5. If
Say-
we- So we live off of $80.
crazy year, we need to have another special assessment. Now we're not having to pay $35 per
Plus
membership in property
another
taxes
$60.
and another $50 per assessment in a special assessment. If we can wrap our tax bill up in regular monthly assessments, why would we not do that?
I guess I'm making myself clear. Maybe because in the past, we've not been able to do this.
That's correct.
Okay. And in the future, there's no guarantee we can still do it. I mean, if you're here 10 years from now, on the 11th year, we maybe have trouble again. No, but I guess I'm overly cautious. I don't want to leave us, in other words, if our tax bill is running around $160,000 a
I
year,
think it's 130, right?
no, he's also,
125,
I know, but plus the 27 or so.
No,
No,
that's
no,
it.
that's
That's
everything,
$100.
that's everything. How much is our letter of credits together?
About 170, isn't it?
152,000.
Yeah, 152.
152,500.
So my line of thinking here is, we have this is not an HOA outside of Fort Worth full of $750,000 homes.
Oh,
We have some relatively expensive homes here, and we have some that are very, very inexpensive. There are a large portion of the membership that own property here are on fixed incomes, and they're not very big ones. So it seems to me, people that are gonna pay their dues are gonna pay another $3 a month. easier than out of November's check,
Right.
they're
right,
gonna
for
pay
Christmas.
another
Right, for Christmas.
$60.
Then the way we'd have to approach that then is the common property assessment will be taken on a graduated basis with an additional $3 per membership per month.
Actually, it goes to more to the manager, because what we need is, we need $130,000 by the time taxes are due. We
Right.
need 152, so what we need to make sure that the restricted fund at all times has $182,000, more or less. So, which we think we have that. We have more than that in there now.
Oh, yeah, I've got,
So going forward, if he can make the commercial businesses run on their own, meaning the motel stands on their own and the golf course, you know, you don't pay 2 cents, I mean, like, you don't pay cheaper chips that, at there versus the Dollar General. We actually make profit at our commercial businesses. No, I'm just saying, if the commercial places that can make money, which is, that's why we hired him, can start making money, then that means $80 for someone that is that's tied in there. Like, if you have one membership,
Okay.
one residential, hold on, then you have $5. Each person coming in here, $5 is going towards the restricted fund every month.
You're
So instead of
just
four,
adding $1.
but I'm taking $1 away from his budget, because right now, whenever I do, my membership's $45.
We actually take, $5, 2 of it is taken away from his budget because only 3 of it goes into the restricted, fund as far as,
Because we have a
As-
historical.
yes.
Right, so, and that's another thing that, okay, so out of the 182, you have to minus that. But what I'm trying to say is, as long as he can, we don't have to do the common property. If we always have on October 30th, $130,000 to be able to write a check,
And if we
that
don't,
means we have budgeted our members, and it's not gonna be such detrimental on November when they're trying to think of Christmas and everything else. They don't have to come up with a $35 a pop.
Yeah, but the thing is that special assessment should be in there in case.
We're not-
We're not
No,
talking
we're not
about the
talking
special
special, this is
assessment at
common
all.
property, do
Okay,
away with the common
let's
property.
let's boil this down. You want to remove common property assessment from the
No,
declaration?
absolutely not.
Okay.
I want to clarify the language so that its intended purpose is stated.
Okay,
I'm just saying, the better business model would be to assess it as part of regular assessments in small increments than to have everybody here handed,
It's like an escrow account.
assessments for however many lots they own right before Christmas.
okay, well, that's why I was saying, so what you want to do is have the special assessment paid,
Not special assessment.
excuse me, common property assessment paid in 12-month increments. Then how
I'm
do
not
you?
saying I want the common property taxes included in regular assessments. We will leave the common property assessment for the eventuality that Kenny County sends us a bigger bill than we
Okay.
budgeted for.
So out of the,
But we may not have to
We'll
impose
still have the
it.
capability to impose it, but when we do find that eventuality, it might be that everybody has to pay $4 instead of 35 or 50.
okay, so where's the common, out of the, we are now paying $4 a month that goes into the restricted fund. So what part of that? is-
I'm not saying we gotta do this today.
Because
We've
the
already raised
yeah, right,
assessments
we already
this
raised it
year.
once, but the residential and your membership can be equal. Your residential cannot be larger than your membership.
And it can
So
be a
that's
two-part
$1.
thing. One, later, we can raise it $1 or $2 to help defray some of this. And while he's working on his budget, as our businesses grow and eat up more of our losses, he may be able to throw $1 out of the regular assessments into restricted.
that's the idea.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, I understand that. What I'm saying, I guess, this is my personal confusion, so straighten me out. We're gonna leave the common property assessment in there in case we need it.
Yes.
Okay. So, then we just have to budget the common property taxes,
The regular assessments, into the regular
but
assessment.
we cannot raise the regular assessments that much as part of the way we're restricted now. We have to go back and change.
Now, we
We
can't,
don't,
no,
and
next
we can do
year's,
it incrementally.
yes, and next year we can actually, we can still do $1 for residential.
Right.
Because residentials, this can't be above the
I guess
membership.
I'm just not getting myself,
That's true.
I'm not getting myself across.
But
We
we
cannot-
started
We,
talking
we
about
can't,
what we wanna do today with the
Yes.
paperwork, and then we delved into our plans for the future. Like, this is not gonna happen, this
No.
will happen overnight. Getting the common property assessed in the regular assessments,
right, we got a year to do that.
yeah, that's gonna take some
But
time, but
the thing
that's
is
the goal.
It's
The
in
thing
there.
is that if you change your assessment basis, we can change the assessments, the regular residential assessments every June when the CPI comes out, according to how it's written now. But we can't raise it past that the way it's written now. So if you want to pay, if you want to set aside money for the common property tax, because we can't tax, but they're gonna tax us. It's gotta come from somewhere, so it's, right now, it's, according to all of our documents, it's gonna have to come from the restricted fund, which is the $4, and, well, $3 that goes in there. We can't raise the residential rates and stuff, as it's written now,
Right,
based
but,
on 2.5%.
Right,
But our
but
commercial, but he
his budget going forward
Yes, I
allows
understand that.
for the taxes.
And
So
if
they're
you-
covered. So there's not even, we're not even anticipating having to raise the regular assessments to cover it,
I
because
hope
his
not.
budget going forward is gonna do it.
Well, doesn't.
Today, we're gonna fix this language.
Yes, and I understand that, I just want to make sure that we know where the money is coming and going. And that's all my concern, I don't want to be the board that puts him in budget trouble because we did something that we shouldn't have done or
Well,
didn't have the
Of
proper
the
language.
$45, whatever it is, the amount of money that we pay, okay, $4 goes into the restricted fund,
Right,
and,
$1 is designated,
and the rest of it goes into the general fund.
Right, that's
Right?
correct.
that's right,
So if he can get people to start paying what they owe,
yes.
We would have more money
and commercial,
in both.
and commercial industries.
yes, we would have more money in both.
Correct.
also realize that,
But I still think that we need to look at every year whether we need to raise rates because expenses keep going.
okay, it would be our fiscal responsibility to review it every year.
Yeah,
This
It
year
doesn't
you
mean,
raised it $1.
yes,
right.
right,
And
that was a
is-
2-year period, over a 2-year
And that
period.
is recommended to do, and just don't do special assessments.
Yes.
Right, that's my
That's
point.
Only an
The
emergency.
CPI comes out every June, and first week or so in July, you can access it. And there's a formula for calculating it, whether we raise rates or not. It's a fiscal responsibility that we actually at least look at it and do the calculations. So there's no problem, with that. We don't have to raise them, but we should look at them.
Well, we have to.
Yes. it's
People at this
required.
table are the legal
That's
fiduciaries
right.
for this association.
Right, and
And that would be something I would think that would come from Alan's recommendation, whether we.
It absolutely will.
sure,
whether we
All of
need
it
to
does,
raise-
yes.
Yeah, whether we need
That's
to
right.
raise
He
it or
does the
not.
budget, right.
and he
Yeah,
believes.
and he believes he's got the property taxes wrapped up in his budget.
No, I
So
understand that.
all of this is just an exercise in future planning for eventuality.
That's right.
On a cash flow basis, y'all are in good shape.
And it didn't hurt to get $192,000.
It certainly
But
did.
that we don't, but that we have saving, correct, or we have, I mean, I understand we
Yeah,
have to go
it's, it has to be forgiven, but, yeah.
Have we
that will
filled
be
out what
done.
we're supposed to do?
Yeah,
Pretty
yeah.
much.
I just
We're where we need to be.
As an aside, I talked to Randy, and they've changed the requirements again. We have to wait 6 months from the
No.
date of the initial loan.
Jerry said no.
Jerry said no.
He said they had to
Okay,
do
then
that.
I'll hit Randy up again on it.
It can be done now.
Okay, good. It looks like all of it will be forgiven. At first, they thought we might have to, everybody pay back $5,000, but Jerry says not now.
It was we had 192,000, originally it was 150,000 to be forgiven. And now it looks like all of
It looks like all of it.
Especially with everyone.
So you can write that up for us.
it. And we're not
Alright.
applying
For another one, yeah, so we should be, that's good, no, we're doing good,
Well, Dustin's gonna write it up for board meeting.
don't miss that.
Promises.
Well, I asked him because he writes very well. He's He lived it. He done educated,
Mostly.
mostly.
So,
Okay.
in a nutshell, we're gonna leave the
We're gonna,
common property assessment in there for
Yes,
emergency use.
yes, future boards will have the capability
To
to
do it
assess
if
common
needed.
property assessments.
And that's really
if
all-
they need it.
That's really all I wanted.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted, is for it to remain in there, in case of. Because, if the governing documents don't include options, we could get caught sometime. And since it has to be approved by the membership, and in this election, so,
let's make sure we hire well, which I think we did.
yes.
And the board works together. Then
Okay,
we're good.
so that takes care of that. You're gonna take care of that, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, I just put in there that we can address some of the issues in the bylaws tonight if you guys wanted to take an extra time, otherwise, I guess we're done.
I have no problem discussing it.
I don't need it.
I don't think we can take action in the
No,
workshop,
we
but
can't.
We can certainly discuss it.
Just discuss it when you get ready. Oh, well.
Am I doing the discussing, or are they doing the discussing?
We're going.
That's what I thought. Do we need to like stop it and restart it? I mean, is it?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
If they wanna watch, they can watch.
No, it's a workshop, and we did put in there that if we had time, that we would at least discuss the changes. We weren't gonna make any decisions tonight, we can't have a workshop, no votes will be taken. We're just going to discuss what was given to us by the committee, and we're gonna discuss it again at the board meeting. So, but at least we'll know what everybody thinks by then. Okay, at the last board meeting, we were given the recommended changes by the committee. We've looked them over. I put mine in writing because I'm, anal about things like that. But we're just gonna go over each one and let everybody give an opinion on what they think about it. And we'll start with page 1, where there's very small change, principal offices for transaction busy. The association hereby fixed and located at Fort Clark Springs, Kenny County, Texas, which is all that's required because the designation address is elsewhere in our governing documents, and it's just repeated here. But we'll go down the line and see. Dustin?
My personal opinion is that the proposed revision is unnecessary.
I agree. Rhiannon?
I kind of agree, just because you never know, Alan may have a really great idea where maybe where the offices are located now, there might be somewhere better. And then we'd have to re-report everything. I don't really get.
And it's not necessarily in the bylaws because our corporate documents contain the street address. And in our area, the street address isn't necessarily helpful anyway because GPS is off by about a quarter of a mile sometimes, so.
But it is a workshop,
It
which
is a
means
workshop.
it's not our meeting, so they can.
But it is our workshop.
It's our
But
workshop.
do we care, do we want to
We
know what?
absolutely can. Let
Would
them-
you like,
Yeah.
I mean, like, why we, can you like maybe persuade us why we should leave that in here?
That is not a change that I put in there, it is Travis's.
Okay.
So
Well, I mean, that's
I
why I
don't really
think,
have a whole lot to
Okay.
input on that.
Yeah, Bill, what did you think? Was unnecessary or necessary?
Unnecessary,
Okay,
because we could do the offices and then where we are.
yeah. And again,
not that we're
our
planning on that.
No, I know.
corporate street addresses are in our corporate documents and, okay. The next is on page 3.
Mhm.
Okay, and it just says to formulate and amend or appeal or repeal bylaws containing provisions for the regulation and management of the association consistent with Texas and federal law. And it reads, and the revised declaration, which shall be recorded in the records of Kinney County, Texas, maintained in the office of the association, made available to all lot owners and/or their agents. And they want to, they recommended adding, after the revised declaration, and Article 9 of this document, which I think it's unnecessary because if the Article 9 is adopted, it's already part of the document. So it doesn't need to be added, referenced here.
I agree.
The rest of it?
So said.
Okay, yeah. I mean, if it's already part of the document, it doesn't need to be mentioned here. It's treated here like it's separate, but it's, if it's, and if it isn't adopted, then it doesn't belong in there anyway.
Well, we wanna ask?
I do want to make a point, though. Some of the members and some of the committee I know have mentioned the fact that they were concerned about making changes to the bylaws because of what happened over the last 2 years of the board and the special election. I want to remind everybody that the bylaws needed some tweaking in some areas, and that's, I don't have a problem with that. But the basic issue here was that the board did not follow the bylaws. And that was the major problem. So, but the bylaws can always be tweaked. Things change, society changes. Okay, page 5. There's an addition. This is under the election committee with no changes except they added section 4. The term of the election committee members shall run from September of the year appointed to the following September when the next election committee is appointed by the board of directors. Dustin, comment?
Well, I don't see the necessity in it. I don't see any real harm in it, but it's not necessary.
I agree.
We're not gonna have another regular election between that time, so I'm,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree with you. The election committee serves from the point by
And
bylaws.
we had a hard time getting election committee. If they're gonna be tied for a whole year, we may have a harder time.
And there's no reason,
I
Dustin's
mean,
absolutely,
the election committee is built for an election, for
Right.
one cycle of election.
And then if you have to get called back in, I mean,
Right,
what if you have?
we'd have to have another
PTSD?
election, there's some issues going on, and,
yeah.
yeah.
And those
There's
issues
another-
It's
would
like
be,
being on jury duty, you have to serve for 6 months, right?
yeah. But this is from the time that the bylaws say it's appointed in September to the day that the announcement of the new directors is made, and at that point, the election committee doesn't have anything to do.
Right, so, well,
There's a reason for this.
Okay.
This one we have a reason.
I just want to make everybody
Yeah,
up here.
yeah.
And Bill?
No, I mean, to have somebody sitting by for a year.
yeah, I mean, well,
I like to hear the reason.
yeah, I'd like to hear the
Well, I do
reason.
too. I just wanted everybody up here to.
People who get on an election committee are getting on for a particular reason at that time.
Right,
Things change.
yeah.
So, you know, in a year from now,
Just like, this is
if
only
everything's
until
running
March,
smoothly, you know.
Yeah.
not 3 Marches.
Right, and I mean, I've given my opinion, and she very well may sway it, so I'd
Right.
love to hear the
Yeah.
argument behind it.
This is, there was a reason for this, and that was because there was no election committee. We didn't have time to get an election committee together to come up with new members with the removal. This is part of the removal, you know, after effect of the removal. They were removed. We should have had an election committee who then stepped in because they were already there to pick up the slack and start a new election and have it moving almost instantaneously once we knew what the vote was. So that's what the thinking is here, to
What if-
protect the people in the future.
What if, shouldn't this be a part, in the process of removing the board? So,
Oh, even the removing of the board is pretty vague.
no, but I'm just saying that maybe bring back the committee from the prior election to help with her? I don't know, I just don't know about it in this.
In this particular instance, it just happened to be a non-election year, or you would have had a committee. From now on out,
That's right, it wasn't on.
from now on out, every year will be an election year,
Right.
whether it be 2, 2, and 1. So you're gonna have a standing committee already from September
All
through
we're asking is that they're standing.
and I pretty much knew why, because we
Yeah. Yeah,
discussed all these things months ago. But there will be a standing committee from September to the last Saturday